Welcome to the People at Work podcast. I'm Amanda Dundas. We recently sat down with leading survey practitioners from Intel, JetBlue, and Flowserve to talk about their evolving survey programs as well as new innovations. The following is from Michael Harris's presentation about Intel's innovative pilot program on proactive pulse surveys.
All right, thank you, Victoria, Amanda, OV team, for having us today. I was really just came to listen to Mike and Mark, but apparently there's a cost of entry for me, so we'll keep going. We're going to talk about something on a smaller scale now, something that's a pilot study that we tried here at Intel, and this was co-led by my great coworkers Kelly Herwick and Joe Milton on the People Analytics team here at Intel. And we had fantastic support from our external partners, Claire and Nimi, and so I just want to give a shout out to them as well. So thanks to all of those folks, and it's my honor to present their work today. So if we could go on to the next one. So something that we wanted to experiment with was, kind of lean into the idea of another variation on continuous or more frequent sensing. This is something we would have tried with or without the pandemic, but the pandemic gave us that extra incentive to try something different with respect to checking in with people more often. So we wanted to experiment with something. And the initial conceptualization of the idea was, what if every Friday afternoon we sent every member of a team kind of a team check-in pulse that just said, hey, how was your week? And in the following week, the manager could check in on those results and make sense and have that more frequent kind of check-in and maybe have some insights emerge from something like that. So we were excited about the opportunity to try something with greater frequency and with greater brevity. But we also recognize that there were some potential limitations with this. The first one is a limitation that we see in a lot of the sensing activities that all of us are involved in, which is it would have been another retrospective exercise, but looking backwards. And as we all know, it's hard to put the milk back in the glass after it's been spilled, and there's no point in crying about it. And we wanted to see if we could do something that maybe was a little bit more proactive. The other limitation was the potential for trust issues. So here we are in the pandemic. People are now working from home rather than being in the office on a Friday afternoon. And what if we suddenly hit them with a pulse that might have been interpreted as, hey, it's Friday afternoon. Are you still online and still working? And that wasn't, of course, at all the spirit or the intent of what we wanted to test out. So we tried to address both of those. And I'll share a little bit about the design that we came up with and that we tested on the next slide. So we experimented with two innovations. One is that we reframed the pulse as a forward-looking exercise administered for each employee timed just before their weekly staff meetings, with the idea that the manager and the team could identify and discuss any enablers, roadblocks, and help needed in the week ahead. So in other words, setting themselves up for success in the future rather than spending their time diagnosing what's happened in the past. And the other thing we did was we drew inspiration from the progress principle, the notion that accomplishing something in your work each day, great or small, is in itself highly intrinsically motivating and is perhaps a driver of engagement that hasn't gotten enough attention in our sensing activities and in our employee engagement models. And for anyone who's not familiar with the progress principle and the work of Teresa Amabile and Steve Kramer, there's some references in the back of this material, and I know OV is going to be distributing it sometime after the session. So let me share just a little bit about what we learned, and I'll be happy to answer other questions if time allows, and we can move on, Victoria. Thanks. So we piloted the design with a 50-person organization made up of roughly a half a dozen sub-teams over a 6-week period, and we just asked for their feedback. Not surprisingly, those teams that were most disciplined about participating and discussing the results on a weekly basis were the ones who were most likely to perceive benefits to their team. And on the one hand, they said the process did help them unearth issues or opportunities that otherwise might not have been emerged or discussed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those challenges were always resolved for them. So there's something missing from the design in terms of the facilitation of those results or preparation or willingness to commit to taking action that we didn't solve for on this and that we'll continue to think about. And a few other takeaways that we'll share as well. There were weeks where teams and participants, they just didn't have anything new to report or discuss. And when that's the case, it was hard for them to see value in the process. And I think Mark just talked about, continuously and frequently hitting people with, how are you now? How about now? How do you feel now? There's a cost to that, and so we did get some feedback that maybe weekly was too often, and that we should think about something a little less frequent than that. There's also a relevancy, a what's in it for me element that needs to be better articulated or offered in order for participants to see that value, particularly when there wasn't something new or emerging that really needed to be addressed. But with a lot of our activities, right, manager and leader support is always critical, and the teams that perceived the most value out of the exercise were the ones where the managers and leaders really leaned into the spirit of the exercise and were disciplined about reviewing those results, trying to drive a conversation on a weekly basis and get value, squeeze the value out of the process. So in terms of the proactive piece of it, participants told us there was value in looking ahead and thinking about the week ahead and having that opportunity to address issues or get help if that was the case and when that was the case. But what they also told us is nobody can predict their week all the time. All of us have surprises in our daily jobs, and so it would be valuable if during the making sense of the data on a weekly basis to both talk about the week ahead, but also to look backwards and say, what was true about how we thought that last week was going to go? What happened versus what we expected to happen, and what could we learn from that and make use of that as well? So having a process that's both prospective and retrospective is something that we would think about doing differently in the future. And then lastly is the thing that these 50 folks had in common is that they were all part of the same organizational hierarchy. That's how they were chosen for participation. But these weren't all employees who had common work deliverables. Many of them work on project teams with people outside of the function that they report into. And we would love to try an exercise like this with a true project team where everybody who's being pulsed has in common with each other common work deliverables that they're working towards. So something like an on-demand project team effectiveness survey or check-in pulse is something that we're interested in spending more time looking at in the upcoming year. Thanks for letting us share our story with you today.
Thanks for listening. You can find the full webinar, How Leading Companies Are Innovating Their Survey Programs During the Pandemic, on our website at orgvitality.com.